Hello, everyone. It's me, Saad. I have been working on an empowered project on the side with Professor Mosera and Denise. And so my project involves basically combining a bunch of justification diagrams together so that at the end, a user is able to get a final justification diagram with all of the assemblies and requirements. And at the end, that can just help the user with finding out if their strategies or their practices that they have selected meets the criteria that is given from a justification or a UVL diagram. And so for the purpose of Empowered, we're going to look at the specific case of recruitment strategy only for this project and for this demo. And so we can get started off by checking out that, for example, at the left, we have all of our practices a user can select. And so as part of my demo, I'll just kind of act like this, but I have, for example, practices to select to recruit my participants, and there's 4 strategies we can see over here. And so I'm going to go through each strategy, and I'm going to be like, for example, want to add this one, which is poster. I read the description, I check out the conclusions from the justification diagram, and I add it to my cart. Now, just adding one single justification diagram doesn't really do anything because we already have one right in front of us right here, for example, for poster, and we have an individual one for chat, for example. And for example, I want to add this in, and when I try to add this in, I'll notice that now I have 2 of these practices that I want to add in. However, I don't have a specific sort of justification diagram to show I need to make all these conclusions for my recruitment strategy. And so this software kind of helps to kind of mitigate and try to provide a better solution for it. So along with poster and chat, for example, I'm going to add in reuse directory under phone. I'm like, you know what? I want to use an existing directory. I read the description and I was like, I think this is something I want to do part of my recruitment strategy. And so I add this to my cart as well. And now when I'm referring to adding to this cart constantly, I mean by going to the cart and trying to check if your configuration, so the selected practices, for example, in this case for recruitment strategy, if they are a valid configuration. This means that not every single selection that you do might have a valid configuration. For example, reuse directory and build directory actually conflict with each other. And for that, for example, reason, you won't be able to get a final justification diagram because it's not a valid configuration. And so this is a very important step where the software kind of comes in and the algorithm checks that, hey, these are the selected nodes by the user, and can I validate to confirm, is this something that is working? And can I get a final justification diagram with all the conclusions if this is a correct or valid configuration? And so moving on to the next step, I'm going to do a validate configuration step. And so I get a prompt saying that the configuration is valid, which is really good. And then what we're going to see at the left over here is that we're going to get a new section called produce. And so produce essentially takes it to the next step where we not only have our selected validated configurations, but now we also want to generate our new justification diagram. And so when I was referring to all these individual justification diagrams, the final justification diagram with all 3 selected in my nodes should be combining all of them. But of course, that's something that the software and the algorithm actually does now so that the user, me or for example myself that doesn't really have an idea as to what the algorithm for example may work like, they can use this. And so we're going to go on to the next step, which is called generate justification. And so the first thing that we see is called a refinement. And so for example, the phone directory that we selected, we used, I think, reuse directory, if I'm not wrong. And so we noticed that reuse directory actually needs a refinement. And so this is the parent node or parent practice, it's just called phone. And we can actually select which sort of practice we want to go for, and which one we want to tie it to phone, because reuse directory is a type of a phone practice. And so for the purpose of this, I'm just going to select, for example, call script is available. And then now that I've selected that call script is available, I've already sort of refined reuse directory. And so now the final step that's only left is that what do I want to make the conclusion of all my 3 validated practices and a strategy as to why did I put them together. And so just for the purpose of this, a user can put in whatever conclusion they feel comfortable with. And so I'm just going to put in combine strategy. And the strategy that I'm going to do for strategy, I can just put in any words I want. I'm just going to leave it as combined strategy. Of course, for a user that actually has experience with this, they can use different strategies to combine it. Just for the purpose of the demo, we're going to leave those just as boilerplate code or boilerplate text. So I'm going to press submit, and now before I press submit, my expectation is to have a final justification diagram with all three of these selected nodes with my updated conclusion and strategy, and also from the previous step, my refinement of the phone, which is reuse directory. So let's do submit. It takes a couple of seconds, and boom, now we not only have a text file of our .jd file, but we actually have a final justification diagram with all of our practices. And so something that probably looks familiar is the combined strategy and combined strategy strategy that we had. And so both of these are showing up here because we selected three practices that needed to be assembled together. And so the software, the algorithm runs that it does work like that, and it runs a JPipe justification diagram based off this text over here, where we're able to get a final justification diagram to show that these are all the conclusions and strategies that a user must do in order to, for example, get, for example, to show that they have used phone, they have used poster, and they have used chat. And so this project kind of put everything together, and it shows a final justification diagram for the user. There are some limitations and some new refinements, and so a huge kind of next point would be to create a PDF version of this, which is downloadable for practitioners or for any users, so that they can just have a better insight to understand what they're exactly looking at, because this can look a bit complicated. However, when we actually do print out the JPipe PNG or CSVG file, it actually is pretty simple. And simply, all we're showing is that we have, for example, these three practices, and we want to show that we assemble them together from this strategy. And in order to show that we have each of these practices, we have conclusions from all of them. But yeah, that's all my project. Thank you for listening.